but the plans are out there. 12,000 is quite a bit. And yeah, I have some concerns about it. What characterizes the idea of a mega constellation, the mindset that they're using going into this, is that these satellites are meant to be disposable. That those satellites might not be that to which it has safety features on it.
Welcome back on the SpaceInfo podcast. Here we talk about space and everything related to it. If you are passionate about space, astronomy, technology and everything about it, you can join all our social platforms at the SpaceInfo Club or our website at www.spaceinfo.club, where tons of content and a community of experts are there waiting for you. This is the SpaceInfo Club. Welcome back, everyone. Today we have Benjamin Ogden again as a guest here on the podcast. So good morning and thank you for being here.
Yeah, great to be here, Sebastiano. I had a ball last time and I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, and before going on, I'd like to thank all the people that watched and listened to our podcast last time. It was very successful, so thank you for commenting and giving us feedback. So today we have new hot topics to talk about. And maybe we can start by talking, I know that there have been some interesting news on this side in the last days. We can talk about China, and we can talk about their plan to launch the first satellite mega constellation in August this year, 2024. So maybe you have some words, Benjamin, to say about this, and then we will discuss about.
Sure, yeah. No, you're exactly right. Just recently, like you said, China has announced in August the first tranche of about 12,000 satellites. And this is their effort to mirror really the Starlink network. It's a telecommunications mega constellation that they want to put up. It will take, I believe, a few years to accomplish or achieve, but the plans are out there, and 12,000 is quite a bit. And yeah, I have some concerns about it that we can certainly talk about. Mainly, not the fact that China's doing this. I mean, this now is becoming a trend for the nations that can do this, or the companies. As you know, Starlink plans on putting tens of thousands of satellites. Project Kuiper as well in the U.S. through Amazon is looking to do quite a few. OneWeb. China's just the latest, but it brings to mind some concerns that that's a lot of satellites. That this is unprecedented, and it's a lot of satellites going to low Earth orbit, and at a time when we really haven't figured out how to do space traffic management effectively. That's probably the biggest concern that I have. I think overall the mega constellation idea is a great concept, and it will benefit everyone who wants to utilize space assets around the world, around the globe. That's what it's for. But when it comes to practical management of this thing, I'm really concerned. And the U.S. has a plan right now, at least through the Commerce Department, to develop space traffic management procedures, technology, warning procedures, all of that, collision warnings. But that doesn't mean that the rest of the world is going to play into that or buy into that. And as we know, with China, they may not agree to the procedures and the standards that the U.S. establishes. And so you have a lot of these constellations, mega constellations, these satellites going. I believe there could be a risk of collision, and so that's probably my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, sure. And lately we have talked about the outer space treaty also here on the channel, and for sure this is a sort of I would say framework in which nations, agencies, also private companies have to operate into it. But we have seen that in the last few days what became a static fire test for a Long March rocket, which came out as a disaster, and we started to getting used to China being capable of launching successfully every rocket, at least for the information that passed through the government, their agencies, because we all know that this is, let's say, the policy of of China about information. But we have seen also the images and the videos of what they just keep doing with testing with people, and moreover the propulsion system is a liquid one and an hypergolic one, so it is particularly toxic. It is a mix of hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, which is particularly toxic. So it remembers of the tests people used to make in the 60s. For example, we all maybe remember the disaster in French Guiana in 1960 with the same mixture. And now we have seen how China keeps going with their policy. So maybe I would like to say that quite probably they are going to have the same approach also in traffic management, and let's say when maybe it's not the right way to say it, but when things happen inside China, so let's say a rocket which falls back in the same territory, in the same land from which it lifted off. It's an internal problem of China, but when you have to put a constellation into orbit, you have also to dialogue and to have treaties and also relationships with other countries, particularly if you are going to put a lot of satellites into a very crowded orbit. So I think that also their diplomacy have to develop, also the international relation have to become quite relevant with other nations. And I don't know how you see the thing, and also the political point of view.
Yeah, no, your logic is very sound. It's a very good conclusion, because if you think their safety record, like you just mentioned, this latest one being the explosion on the static test, along with all the irresponsible launches we've seen over the years, with first stage rockets coming down who knows where, in a hazardous manner. If you take that safety record and add in the secrecy of China, as you just said, and the unwillingness to communicate openly with the global community, I don't know how anyone could draw a conclusion other than this could get dangerous when they start launching tens of thousands of satellites, and under the geopolitical competition and the pressure they're feeling to keep up with the United States. And so I think we're just gonna, it's worth the United States and Europe and other countries that all have a vested interest in space to constantly reach out to China to try to at least establish some sort of norms and standards as these new operations come on board. And also something that people don't think about a lot when we start talking about the number of satellites that we're putting up is, at the same time, there's a parallel effort to begin what we call dynamic space operations, where companies and nations will want to maneuver their satellites for different reasons, logistics or military purposes or things of that nature. And what that does is that takes out the predictability factor of an orbit. Even with tens of thousands of satellites on orbit that aren't moving for other reasons aside from station keeping, that takes a lot of effort to make sure that there are no conjunctions or collisions in space. But you start adding in nations that are moving their satellites for reasons without potentially telling other space participants, it becomes even more complicated.
Yeah, that's for sure. Also, I think that not all the people really, I would not say understand, but have a practical idea of how much crowded some orbital slots can be. Because we should imagine that we have to move, let's say on Earth, we want to drive to one city to the other, and for sure we try every time to take the shorter way to take the shorter time. And in space it's somewhat like the same. We are not usually optimizing the timing, but maybe the Earth coverage or let's say the ground track we want to have. We want to pass over some cities for telecommunication or for observation or anything. But so if you start adding this kind of constraints, the space that you have at your availability, particularly if you also limit the altitude from the surface that you want to have, so the overall space become very, very small. And if you want to put a lot of things, a lot of satellites into that space, Well, there is not so much space for everyone, so this is a problem. And if you add this aspect to the glitches and the problems that you can encounter while developing a constellation, because maybe we read the news and say, okay, China will put these satellites into orbit, but okay, now we are talking about China, but we can also talk about, for example, Starlink. And okay, there is this is a new thing, a sort of new technology, or for sure a new implementation of an existing technology, but you can experience some problems. As you said, this is a really good point. A dynamical management of this constellation can just make new problems. So we have seen that the news is from space.com, and says that someone found a piece of SpaceX space junk mentioning the orbited Starlink satellite. So we don't really know the causes for this, but this is a problem that agencies can encounter when developing and trying to optimize the orbit. Maybe agencies are trying to make orbit closer or with new parameters, I would say, but some problems can arise, and some satellites can experience some problems and also glitches and re-enter uncontrolled.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a good point, because what characterizes the idea of a mega constellation, the benefit of it is, and what a lot of companies are the mindset that they're using going into this, is that these satellites are meant to be disposable in many ways, right? You put so many up, and with the intention of, yeah, they're probably going to be deorbited very quickly if we need. And so, depending on the country, the design features of those satellites might not be that to which it has safety features on it that we need to maneuver from collisions or conjunctions. Now, I think the U.S. and Starlink is pretty responsible with some of their collision avoidance technology that they are putting on these satellites, but there's nothing saying that China will do the same, or any other country that's putting up a lot of satellites. And so you may just have these satellites up there that don't have any maneuver capability or a way to avoid collisions, and you have thousands of them. And so it just touches upon that there's a lack of standards as this begins to play out.
Yeah, sure. Also, maybe someone you mentioned the maneuverability, and maybe on the other side there is also the, let's say, the detectability of debris. Maybe not everyone knows that debris can be tracked from the ground, maybe using radars or other kind of technologies. Also, some small companies are trying, and now I'm saying that word, I'm saying artificial intelligence, to develop new ways of predict also the orbits, the trajectories that satellites or also debris can have in space, in order to say, okay, this debris is going to re-enter, this debris is going to impact another one, or is going to finish into a graveyard orbit, so the danger is much lower. So there is another news which says that US Space Force is working closely with SpaceX to start tracking Starlink debris, and this is for sure a very good effort in this direction. So as you said at the beginning, small and commercial satellites are particularly disposable with respect to the others, the big ones. So also they are sacrificable in some sort of sense, and if being much cheaper than before is a feature, this can also become a problem when companies say, okay, instead of developing one satellite with to test one technology, with the same amount of money I develop 2, 3 of the same satellite in order to have better chances to operate in orbit. This can also be under the risk management point of view a difficulty, because you are for sure less careful about operating it, how you use it, so can generate a problem also on this side. So yeah, please.
No, I agree with all of that. And I think, to me, you know, the exclamation point on this whole topic is that these companies are not going to slow down, or these countries aren't going to slow down. They are going to continue to put tens of thousands of satellites. There's nothing stopping them, nor should there be. But will the international community first try to develop norms of behavior or standards to manage all this traffic? And will it come in time before there are so many satellites operating in their own respective manners by the nations that launched them? I am fearful that we will not reach that, and there was a higher risk at that point for some sort of catastrophic collision.
Yeah, for sure. And now maybe I would pass on another topic. We start,
Sure.
let's say, ideally from the very same orbit, but thinking about something bigger, which is the International Space Station. And that moment, much, I wouldn't say I waited, but from so many people is going to come, because around 5-6 years the International Space Station could be deorbited, and NASA assured a lot of people, a lot of companies that they will give support until commercial space station will be able to safely and 100% operate in place of the International Space Station. But we all know that this space vehicle is gonna be deorbited in a matter of years. And they selected SpaceX with a contract to develop a new kind of vehicle to safely deorbit the International Space Station. And what's being said is that awarded them with almost $900 million for that contract, excluding the cost of launch of that new vehicle, which is a sort of I would say mixed way of the contract that NASA is going to make with the private companies. So maybe you'd like to add something about this, because I'm really interested into seeing how it will evolve in time.
Yeah, it's a very emotional issue, or passionate issue for some people right now. You probably see it as well in the space community. I don't know how much the average citizen understands what's going on, but you did a good summary. I mean, NASA has decided that it will be deorbited around 2030 at the end of its life, and they have hired SpaceX to do that. There's still debate out there whether that was the right decision, and we can talk about that if you want. But as far as the deorbiting, I mean, I think just from the first point, I think SpaceX was the right decision for NASA to go with. Mainly, and I don't know what added to this decision, but just from an outsider's view, it seems like SpaceX is going to have the most to lose if this isn't done properly, right? I mean, we just talked about Starlink. Presumably in 2030, Starlink will still be the most. The satellites there will be the most satellites on orbit in low Earth orbit, even with China trying to catch up. And so, why not have the company that has the most traffic going on in LEO to try to tug this mammoth object out of orbit into back to Earth and deorbit it into the Pacific Ocean, which, if people aren't aware, it's a point called Point Nemo. It's the furthest place in the Pacific Ocean from any land. So, a lot of satellites have been deorbited there, but it's quite an undertaking. Like you just said, the cost value in itself, just moving this thousands of tons of a satellite back into Earth orbit, or out of Earth orbit back into the atmosphere. And so I think from a technical and practical standpoint, it's a very big job. I think SpaceX is probably the right person, the right company to do it. I don't know if you want to get into whether we should be doing it or not, but I think NASA has done a full set of analysis on this, the pros and cons of deorbiting, and the best way to mitigate any risk to populated areas on Earth. And I think this is right approach.
Yeah, before getting into maybe telling a couple of words about if it is right or not, the pros and cons. We all talked at the beginning about space debris falling back into Earth, and an interesting topic to be underlined, in my view, is the fact that here on Earth, if you are driving your car, for example, and you make an accident, you are directly responsible for that accident, whether you are driving into, let's say, your country. So if you're an American citizen, you're driving in America, or if you, let's say, come into Europe and make an accident, you are responsible. Your insurance will maybe cover your damages and things like that. Let's stay in a general approach. But what happens for space, at least at the moment, and what's been so far, is the fact that if a country, an agency, a company launches a satellite and this satellite falls back into Earth, then that country has to grant responsibility for that kind of damage that could be caused from your satellite to another country, another person, another company, and anything like that. So what happens if, for example, in this case, pieces of a Starlink constellation are falling back into the US soil? Probably it is the least problem. But what happens if they hit another country, people in other country? This can also be can generate legal issues also under this point of view, besides the other problems. And also we all know that the International Space Station is an international collaboration between different countries. So a very important aspect to be taken into consideration is also this kind of responsibility. And I think that this can give problems to a lot of agencies, but can also be a very great starting point for a new collaboration also in this sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's messy. It gets messy, like you laid out. It's first, like you said, it's an international space station. We tend to forget that. The U.S. is saying this is what we're going to do, at least with the U.S. modules, that are up there. And that's okay. But Russia has a lot of equipment there, Canada, Japan. I mean, there's a lot of countries that were behind this. Are they okay with this plan to deorbit? And I would assume the U.S. allies are. Russia, we will see. But that right there causes the first set of complications. And then, as you mentioned, the liability clause of the Outer Space Treaty, the Liability Convention, stating that, like you clearly put, that any debris that hits Earth and damages anything is the responsibility of that launching nation. So if this deorbiting of the ISS goes awry and doesn't go well, and debris falls somewhere on Earth, how do we determine, depending on what the debris is, who's at fault? Obviously, if it's a certain module, we know whose segments or what. But if it's any other type of equipment, is it an international problem? Is it the U.S.'s problem? Since this is an agreement, is it the whole conglomeration? This is one of many legal problems that could occur in space, as we know. Hopefully, it won't come to that. NASA seems pretty confident they could deorbit this safely into the ocean, but you're right. The environmental hazards itself, that's a whole separate issue that's got people raised as well. So a lot going into this decision, and it's a big undertaking for a piece of equipment that's one of the modern marvels of our time. People also forget that this thing was literally put together on orbit, launched from different locations and assembled on orbit. I mean, this is an engineering feat. And so you hear a lot of people with a counterpoint saying we need to be more respectful of how we decommission this thing.
Yeah, it would be nice to have the ISS as it is now, without damaging and putting it into a museum here on Earth. But I think that physics is not on our side. But as you said, there are many modules, and probably all the countries which are allied to United States are on the same line on the decision of deorbiting or not. But since the latest relations with Russia, for example, maybe they could decide that they don't want to deorbit the International Space Station. For sure, they have rights probably on their modules, but they cannot decide for the others. So maybe I, in my view, I don't know yours, and maybe you'd like to tell us something about it. If it is possible, or how is the probability that the International Space Station can be separated as it was built? We all know that it started from the Mir space station, and then different modules has been added in time. Maybe we can just go backward and separate the modules and leave the Russian ones in orbit. And I don't even know if they can be considered autonomous nowadays.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not an expert on the technical aspects or engineering aspects of it either. I have heard people talking about this as an option, people that are technically smarter than I am. So I would think there is a pathway to that, but I don't know. That would take probably some additional effort. And on that note, would SpaceX be responsible for that? Or, is that part of the contract, in other words? Do they send up people to start decoupling everything and taking the pieces apart? Or is now this a joint effort, like you said, in reverse, that the Russians and Americans have to do this together? Again, it gets very complicated. And if something goes wrong in that effort and it creates debris that destroys a satellite, then who's at fault? Because maybe it was done because of some actions taken by two nations trying to take this thing apart in space. Yeah, so it's not an easy problem at all, no matter which way you look at it. But I really don't know the technical aspects of it, if it can be done. That's interesting. I may look into some of that and see.
Yeah, a lot of people, for example, measuring the Tiangong space station, and again, we have to rely on the images and videos that comes from the internet. So let's keep in mind that they come from a very controlled media diffusion. So they are probably real, but that's not everything which is happening. And we all remember that how it began when China tried to put the Tiangong space station in orbit. They lost control initially, then some astronauts, we can call astronauts generally speaking, have been sent there, and it seems that now it is 100% operative, and a few images have come to us, and we have seen, at least from what appears, that the interior is let's say on the same line. We could compare SpaceX and the space shuttle in terms of the modernity of the components, of the design and things like that. So some people say, okay, the International Space Station is a symbol, is a sign of international cooperation, top technology, top research in the world, but maybe the structure itself, I don't mean the mere, let's say, metal, but also the way it was conceived, is quite of old conception. Maybe this is a technical aspect to consider.
Yeah, and this gets me to my position of disagreeing with people who say we need to save the International Space Station, maybe move it to a higher orbit, make it a heritage site. Because it kind of touches upon what you just said. I think they are going in with an assumption that first of all, you can sustain it in these, whatever orbit you're going to put it in, sustain it forever with this old technology, and a lack of attention on it. Trying to maintain it, keep it from decaying, its orbit decaying back closer to more populated orbits. That's one aspect. The other is the technology that's in this thing, that some people say, hey, we could reuse some of this, repurpose it, I don't think that's even feasible. It would be like trying to create the new iPhone with a computer from the 1980s. It's just, they're not compatible. And so when people say we can now, if we want to recycle the components, somehow in more like the metals and the copper and the whatever, okay, that's a different story. But to reuse it for gateway, let's say out in cislunar, the Artemis mission, no one's going to use that. If you've ever tried to get rid of an old computer somewhere to a store, they look at you like, I can't use this, I'm just going to go dispose of it. So I think we're faced with something similar with the International Space Station. I totally agree with people that it needs to be saved in some manner, but putting it in a higher orbit where no one can see it from Earth, just knowing it's there, it seems like the cost benefit is not worth it. And so that's why I lean more towards where NASA's going with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with your point, and yeah, for sure, everyone. I would say personally that the International Space Station has almost my same number of years. So I've grown up with the international with the International Space Station, and so I think I can understand people saying, okay, that's the sign of what we've done so far. But as you say, I think that you mentioned a perfect example. Yeah. Using such kind of component, recycling is not a mere kind of taking that pieces of metal and using again. It's not that simple for sure. So we have to face the truth basically, and we can see it that as the fact that when we won't have the station anymore, maybe we'll have 4, 5, 6 private space stations. So this is the evolution of the thing, and I think that that's just the beginning, and this is I like this point of view, seeing in this way, and yeah, also NASA said that they will give 100% support also to private companies, and they want the DEORBIT station until private ones will be available. So I think that this is the best way to proceed and to go on. And yeah, also we started talking about private companies. Maybe we can introduce the last topic of the day, and maybe someone would like to tell us in the comments if there is something that we forgot to consider, or something we'd like to talk next time if you want. And the company is EOSX Space, that announced that they are starting to give new services, in particular balloon flights, and yeah, the news say at the edge of outer space. So I'd like to start to these last words, at the edge of outer space, because in my view is not, they just use the word space to make the news more relevant, but that's not really space.
Yeah, I agree. And when you reached out to me on this topic particularly, that's the first thing that struck me. And for the listeners out there, if you don't know about it, like you said, it's a company that is going to give balloon rides. It's not the first one, by the way. There's one in Florida as well that they take tourists basically up to about 39 or 40 kilometers for a few hours to kind of see the edge of the atmosphere and this and that. But the point here, as you mentioned, is they're using the word space here, which to the average listener is probably like, so what? Yeah, you get to view space from this high altitude. But I think it brings up this whole underlying issue of where space begins, which is important in the space community, in the legal community, in the national security community. A lot of communities that are now moving out into space, to include commercial company, people making money. It matters, and I find it interesting that we are now seeing companies say this in their marketing and in their titles and in their advertising, which they are welcome to do. I mean, you could argue, is this false advertising or not? But let's say they want to use this as a marketing scheme. The interest I have in this is, will this have an impact on the international community finally coming to a table to define where space actually begins? Because there is no legal beginning of space. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people associate the Kármán line, which is 100 kilometers, as the official start of space, but it's not in the outer space treaty. It's not in any UN documents. It is actually a line. Kármán was a scientist from the 50s and 60s who theorized that the beginning of space was about 100 kilometers, based on where electrical, charges began and basically a lot of the atmospheric conditions stopped. I mean, to put it simply. And he's close to right. They've actually done studies putting satellites in that area to show that he was close. I think it's about 118 kilometers where that physical line actually happens. But the point is the international community never agreed that this is where we all operate and that's where space begins. And so when you have these companies that are only going to 40 kilometers saying that they're going to space, that is not accurate in terms of in relation to the Kármán line, but is it going to generate a new definition of where space is?
Yeah, I don't know if I've interrupted you or if you're...
No.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to underline that they are private companies, so let's say on this side they are using private money, so people who are voluntarily putting money into these companies and use for what they are built for, so building extra atmospheric balloons, let's say, to promote this kind of tourism. So yeah, they are not public agencies, they are not doing some sort of space research, which is not actually space research. So apart from marketing, they are doing what they say, and people are quite conscious of that. And in the measure of this new, let's say, activity being built for to make people more conscious about, let's say, environment, giving a look to our planet from above, I think that this is very positive, because also, again, as private companies, they need private monies and also the money from customers. So people who are 100%, let's say, conscious of what they are going to do. So under this point of view, for me, it's quite positive. So they are not harming anyone. So
right.
This is for sure a pro under this point of view. Under the others, let's say we all remember what happened with the Titan submarine, without going into too deep into this, but this is for sure safety is an aspect to consider, and is a matter quite important when you have civilian on board, when you are going to the commercial aspect, and because usually safety is not going to the same direction of your commercial interest. But apart from this, probably and apart from using the word space in the marketing, this is a positive initiative. I know that also a lot of people are promoting this kind of activity also for the Space Perspective company, which is the Florida-based company that I think you mentioned at the beginning. So yeah, a lot of we don't have to forget that when America started to go on the moon, the second mission on the moon, Apollo 11, Apollo 12, and so on, were very successful and also very appreciated by the general public. But then at the 16th, 17th mission, and also before, the general public started okay, this is normality, we don't care anymore, this is no more exceptional. So it's like taking an airplane almost, and so we all know what happened next. So please go on.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say your points are valid when you talk about this having a lot of positive aspects, if we can get the cost down, of course, because right now it's millionaires and billionaires doing most of the the trips into this region. If I 100% agree with you, if the cost comes down and these balloons are readily available to the average person, it can do wonders for things you just mentioned, how we look at the environment, how people see and view our space exploration or doing that, and there's all positives with that. I think the military is going to be military's already perplexed a little bit on how to handle this, because if you remember the the incident last year with the
Yeah.
Chinese balloon that flew over the United States. And this was only at about 20 kilometers, not the 40 that these go. That generated a lot of confusion within the U.S. military on who should be handling this balloon, who should be seeing what it is, surveilling it, this and that. Should it be the Air Forces or should it be the Space Force? Now, clearly, at least in U.S. doctrine right now, the Space Command and the Space Force have responsibility above 100 kilometers. It's written, you know. So why it was really an issue is beyond me, but it was an issue. But it also brings up this fact that this area that these balloons are going to are not quite in space as we know it, where satellites can maintain their orbit. And they're just above where airplanes generally can fly without having an oxidized rocket engine. And so it's this area that's, people have tried to come up with names for it, but it's basically an area where there's technology has not been proliferated there yet, whether it's for tourism, whether it's for military purposes, or you name it, but that's coming. And so I think that's why this is important to start having these discussions on, is this truly a part of space or is it not? Because it has legal implications, it has national security implications, it has sovereignty issues. Because as you know, airspace sovereignty over a nation extends above the nation. It just doesn't have an end. Whereas space does not have sovereignty. And so if you don't have a clear line between those, there are nations and maybe even some companies that could start exploiting that area. And so that starts to give me a little bit of cause for concern.
Yeah, because we have just looking at what's happening in history for the exploration of Earth, for example, going back into the century, when you have some regulatory boundaries, you can basically do whatever you want, because people can tell you that you are doing the wrong thing, that you are illegal. But what's the base of this law? You have no base to say that. So basically, you are almost free to do whatever you want. And I think this is a very important aspect, and also the fact of being on time, seeing that this kind of let's say technology or activity is going to proliferate, and developing on time and legal framework, or at least a way to correctly interpret of what's happening, to avoid let's say limiting too much this kind of activity because you don't know what's happening, or being too late into the regulation and companies will already be doing whatever they want. So knowledge in space, and particularly in this field, I think is very important.
Absolutely, and I mean, I hope they figure it out. I would love to take one of these rides someday. You know, I just think, from a legal perspective, there's a lot to be worked out, even for a company that's trying to do good, and like these companies, it could reach an area if there's some sort of mishap with tourists, like you said, with the submarine, you know, same type of thing. It's not clear how that would be handled legally, depending on how high they're flying, where they are, and we want all that to be established, I think, before this becomes the norm, as you said before.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree, and I hope that a lot of people that will work will look at this video and this podcast will tell us what they think, what's their opinion, and maybe what they want us to discuss next time. I hope there will be a next time. And
absolutely. And
it's been so much a pleasure to talk again with you, Ben. And I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, had a blast. We could talk this all day, as you know, but I know we got other things to do. So, but it's been fun. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks. So see you next time. Bye.
Bye.